Ladies and gentlemen, very good evening and a very warm welcome to this, the 42nd Baggs Memorial Lecture here at the University of Birmingham. It's wonderful to be able to welcome you back to campus, and it's wonderful to be able to resume this great series of lectures. Many of you will have been to previous Baggs lectures, and you will know that this is a lecture series which was made possible by the generous bequest of an alumnus of this university, Thomas Baggs, back in 1973. Thomas Baggs' wide-ranging and distinguished career was in the fields of teaching, wartime journalism, and advertising, both here in the UK and latterly in the USA. And he thought that his career gave him a unique experience from which to question the nature of happiness. He endowed this lecture and asked that this question be tackled by, and I should make this clear, Charles, suitably qualified persons. It's in the benefaction. And over the 42 lectures, we've had leading psychologists, writers, artists, scientists, and politicians. Indeed, the first Baggs lecturer was Yehudi Menuhin, so Charles is in great company this evening. This will be my last Baggs Happiness lecture as Vice-Chancellor. I'm retiring at the end of December. And over the time that I've been hosting these lectures, we've had people from all walks of life, including Clive Anderson, Benjamin Defaniah, Tanny Gray-Thompson, Giles Brandreth, Reverend Richard Coles, Matthew Paris, and most recently, Eve Pollard. So this will be a fitting final lecture in the series that I've been able to host. So this year we're welcoming and honoured to welcome Charles Hazlewood as our Baggs lecturer. Charles is a brilliant and acclaimed conductor. He won first prize in the European Union conducting competition whilst he was still in his 20s, and since then he's conducted many of the world's great orchestras. He's played in New York's Carnegie Hall, the BBC Proms, performed the first ever orchestral headliner at the Glastonbury Festival, and collaborated with artists as diverse as Nigel Kennedy, Wycliffe Jean, Philip Glass, and Goldie, or at least so I'm told. Charles was the founder and is the artistic director of the world's first large-scale professional ensemble of virtuoso musicians with and without disabilities, the Para Orchestra, who made their debut at the closing ceremony of the 2012 London Paralympics. Charles has authored, presented and conducted the music in multiple landmark films for the BBC and Sky Arts, and has won 3 Sony Radio Academy Awards for his shows on BBC Radios 2 and 3. He's recently had the ultimate accolade of being a castaway on Radio 4's Desert Island Discs, and he has 3 TED Talks to his name. Music, of course, is a great part of the history of this university. The first professor of music here in 1905 was none other than Sir Edward Elgar. And as those of you who know me know, music's had a very significant role in my life, as it has, I'm sure, for very many of you. So I'm looking forward to Charles's reflections this year on the theme of happiness, his own life experiences, and also his sense of how music has nurtured happiness in others. At the end of his lecture, Charles has kindly agreed to take questions from the audience. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Charles Hazlewood to deliver the 2021 Thomas Baggs Memorial Lecture on the theme of happiness. Charles Hazlewood.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Sir David. Thank you, all of you, for having me to give a talk about happiness. I mean, it's not end-to-end risk management, is it? It's a wholly more attractive topic for discourse. Now, I won't be telling you anything you don't know when I say that happiness, true happiness, comes from within. I did notice recently, I came across a quote from Charles M. Schulz, the guy that created Peanuts, not the nut obviously, but the comic strip, and he said, happiness is a warm puppy. Well, he's got a point, but we know, don't we, that true happiness comes from within. And I suppose the remarks I want to share with you today largely stem from my discovery and investment in two core principles or qualities from which true happiness has flowed in my life. The first is trust. The ability, first and foremost, to trust yourself, and then once you've done that, by extension, the ability to trust those around you. It's the only way to achieve flow and congruence. I mean, trust is simply the most fundamental gel in every human relationship. As you've heard, I'm a conductor. Music can only work when there is an insuperable, unshakable bond of trust in the room. It's a two-way street, really. Well, a three-way street, arguably, because each orchestral musician, individual orchestral musician, has to trust everyone around them, and then that group collectively have to trust the conductor, and vice versa. It creates this sort of beautiful flowing environment where no one is more important than anyone else. Everyone is listening intensely to everyone else and reacting and responding. It's true democracy, a kind of virtuous circle, and it is all based on trust. Of course, it's a given that there will be high levels of skill, high levels of experience, high levels of hard work, dedication. But without trust, there is nothing. Now, it's interesting when you look back at the history of the conductor-orchestra relationship, or indeed, if you look back to when conducting first emerged at all. You see, music up until the early 19th century had basically been directed, if I can use that word, by someone from within the orchestra. Perhaps the principal violinist or the keyboard player in the midst of it. But as music grew so fast in terms of scale and scope and ambition in the early years of the 19th century, it became clearer and clearer that there needed to be someone standing slightly outside the horseshoe, the semicircle. Someone who could act as a focal point to receive all the disparate parcels of melodic, rhythmic, and harmonic information which are emerging from every corner of the orchestra, and effectively hold a bit of a mirror up, so that those orchestral musicians can sense how things are playing out, collectively as well as individually. And then the conductor, having held that mirror up to all the individuals in the orchestra, can effectively sort of gift wrap it and send it out into an adoring and expectant audience. Now, one of the things that I find interesting is that conducting emerged, and by the way, Mendelssohn, a man who had a great affiliation and great relationship with this great city, by the way, Mendelssohn was one of the first sort of superstar conductors to arrive, certainly in the UK, and to conduct performances of his own music. Now, there was a popular misconception, or should we say confusion, around about the same time, this is sort of the 1810s, 1820s, there was a huge craze around mesmerism. These were men, always men of course, who wore white tie, tailcoat, and sort of electrical currents seemed to come out of their fingers. You look at the conductor, Felix Mendelssohn, for instance, wearing a white tie and a tailcoat, his fingers raised and seeming electrical currents coming out of the end of them. You can see how people got a bit confused. Where does a mesmerist stop and a conductor begin? And so it grew this kind of idea that conductors had magic powers, that they were these kind of all-seeing, all-powerful, all-knowing kind of demigods who ordained and unlocked and drove and made possible every extraordinary sonic contortion. And of course, the nature of the times, in a cultural sense, fed that notion as well, because the world at that time was definitely largely in the grip of the old pyramid structure, the dictator model. You've got some very, very all-powerful, all-seeing, all-knowing, all-controlling guy at the top of that pyramid, and gradually their supreme commands would make their way down through the various strata of workforce. So I suppose, in a nutshell, from what we know of those early performances from Mendelssohn and the other great conductors that followed him through the 19th century and in the first half of the 20th century, there were some incredible, incandescent, life-changing moments of music making, no question. But what's interesting is the way that they were achieved. Because we have it on record. Take Toscanini, for instance, a great conductor of the first half of the 20th century, a supreme icon, an idol even for me. But you watch rehearsal footage, and you can see that it's almost a form of coercion. He's rehearsing not just the orchestra as a whole, but every element within it, almost within an inch of their lives. Where to breathe, how to breathe, where to push, where to pull, how to bend pitch, how to use vibrato. She'd end up with these incredibly well-drilled, incredibly splendid and impressive performances. But you find yourself thinking, how much of the individual qualities of each orchestral musician are actually on display here? Or how much have they been kind of coerced into a very particular image, sonic image, which is the conductor's will, his supreme will? Now, of course, the world at large generally has moved on from the dictator model and indeed from the pyramid structure. I think we understand much more now about the virtuous circle, that if we can get the environment right, where there is a sense of confidence and openness and listening amongst any team, corporate or musical or whatever you care to name, then obviously it's greater than the sum of its parts. Everyone looks better, everyone feels better, everyone flows better. And I mean, look, it was Sir Alex Ferguson beautifully who described the orchestra, not the football team, the orchestra as being the perfect team when he went to see an orchestra play for the first time only about a decade or so ago. He couldn't believe, he was slack-jawed with the quality of trust, of listening. It's that extraordinary, eureka quality that orchestras have, isn't it? Where when you're watching a piece of symphonic literature unfold, no one is in charge for all the time, or even for some of the time. No one is the most important person in the room for more than a glancing moment. The oboe has the main focus. Then suddenly it's gone to the trumpets, it's gone to the first violins, it's gone to a pair of flutes. And as much as anything, it's about watching this glorious form of trusting teamwork, because the oboe needs to trust that the string section who are accompanying his or her line is going to be listening so intensively to place things exactly where the oboist makes it clear they want them placed. The string section is not going to drown out the oboe. They're constantly aware of his or her needs. And then, quick as that, it's moved to another section of the orchestra again, and on. This amazing sense of virtuous circle. So, back to the conductor-orchestra relationship as it seems to me it is today in this more balanced world. I hope I'm not talking about a utopia that doesn't exist. I don't think I am. In this modern form of the orchestra and conductor relationship, it is this two-way street, where if the conductor is doing their job right, they're not actually about exercising control at all. No, it's about the conductor doing the time in advance to come up with such a strong sense of the outer architecture of a piece of music, so that when they arrive at rehearsal, they can create and manifest a fantastically strong and stable, yet fertile environment, within which then every single orchestral musician can bring their particular and unique talents to bear. I feel like I can't express the joy and the wonder of this often enough. Like I can be doing, let's say, a Beethoven symphony in Stockholm on a Tuesday, and the same Beethoven symphony in Hanover on a Saturday. Same me, same Beethoven symphony, two different orchestras. And I say to you, if I'm doing my job properly, I will get two completely different experiences of that piece of music. Because hopefully I've created that environment, I've unlocked that sense of possibility in both situations, where whoever those particular orchestral musicians are in Stockholm and the particular set of orchestral musicians in Hanover, that they all bring their particular and unique talents to bear. That's the beautiful wonder of it. And all of it completely bound up, nourished by and sanctified by insuperable trust. Now, I want to talk to you a bit about a country and a culture which has taught me an immeasurable amount over the years about the trust-building quality of music. This is South Africa. Just before the millennium, I got what I consider to be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. A very wealthy man in South Africa wanted me and a guy I was working with. We were running an opera company in an old music hall in the East End of London at the time. And he invited us to come to South Africa to basically recruit and form and develop a brand new opera company where the bulk of the recruits would come from black South African townships. Now, I don't need to tell anyone here who's been to South Africa, or indeed perhaps is South African, that there is almost no more dizzyingly musical communities in the world than black townships in South Africa. It's like everybody sings about everything all the time. I mean, in the Xhosa culture, there's probably 300 songs for doing the washing up. Can you imagine how many there are for a circumcision ritual, or a wedding, or a funeral? Everything in life is chronicled in song. And it's more than that. Because they don't generally work from a notation-bound system. They don't read music, they don't write music down. Everything is oral. So it means that the ears on any singer you meet anywhere in South Africa are like on fire. They're so quick, so sophisticated and subtle, and so able to retain melodic information. You can teach a tune to a bunch of black South Africans in about 5 seconds flat, and then without anyone saying a word, they will improvise 40-part harmony around that tune because they can. Why wouldn't you do that? Well, I say to you, the LSO, much as we love them, they can't do that. So anyway, we went to South Africa, and we toured around mainly very rural township locations, and in the course of 3 months, we heard about 2,000-3,000 people. And we pulled together a company of 40 of the most jaw-droppingly talented young singers from that great country, the four corners of it. Now, in the first week of the first rehearsal period, something truly dreadful happened. So this company of 40, I think 37 were of color and 3 were white. There was no science behind that, it was just the way that it fell out. Now, one of the black singers had a kind of Damascene moment, or the scales fell from his eyes, and he realized why one of the white singers looked very familiar to him. And the reason was he remembered, he realized, he recollected. This white singer had in a previous incarnation, or in a previous lifetime, not even that, but just a small number of years before, been a particularly pernicious member of the South African police force. This was a guy that would go out of his way to go into a township community to aggress the population, to see if he could cause unrest, if he could cause dis-ease. So this news spread very quickly around the whole company. You can imagine we were suddenly at an impasse. Let's be clear, there is no relationship, or historically, there has been no relationship more devoid of trust in South Africa than that between members of the black community and a white police person. No relationship more devoid of trust. So me and my partner, my colleague, we're like, oh my gosh, that's it. The whole thing is blown, and we're only in week 1 of the first rehearsal period. How the hell are we going to recover from this chasm that has split up down the middle of the rehearsal room? Well, quite remarkably, within a very short space of time, I mean, I'm talking minutes, someone started to sing, and someone else joined, and within a very small amount of minutes, everyone in that room was singing, not just songs of pain and rejection and outrage, but songs of joy, of hope, songs of empathy, songs of tolerance, understanding, of brotherhood and sisterhood. And the company sang for the best part of a day. And whilst they sang, you could see the atmosphere softening and changing, the color coming back into people's cheeks, this sense of little tendrils of trust growing like little bridges through thin air. And by the end of that day, that company was the tightest knit group of musicians, of performers I've ever really had the great privilege to work with. And we went on from there and had an amazing set of experiences. We toured the world, we had a run in the West End. We then went on and made a movie of the Carmen that we'd made, which we shot for very little money in a huge township in the Cape called Kalicha. It's all sung in Xhosa, which, by the way, is about the most brilliantly musical tongue. I mean, you forget Italian. Xhosa is that with bells on and a whole bunch of percussive elements as well. And just by way of giving you a rest from my voice, let's have a little look at the trailer that we made to the film. The film went on to win the Best Film Prize at the Berlin Film Festival and a handful of other awards around the world. It was really like a moment when we felt the company had arrived. But do you know what? That wasn't what was important to the company. There was only one thing that was ever important to this company of singers, and that was making music. Music, their soul, the expression of their deep inner, their inner child, their inner self. And indeed, it may not surprise you to know, if you talk to an older black South African, so someone who remembers being an adult under apartheid, you hear the same story again and again. And again, it shows you just how deeply, organically musical this culture is. That the story would go, yeah, you come home at night and you find that your brother had been taken away, or your aunt or your mother, or maybe your property had been confiscated. But the one thing that no one could take from you was your voice. This is a little taste of Ukamen Ekalicha. Thank you. One of the big challenges for me when I started out as a conductor was believing enough that I wasn't a complete fraud. I won a competition, as you heard at the beginning, a Europe-wide conducting competition in my 20s, which was an amazing kind of shot in the arm to my embryonic career, but also, frankly, a terrifying sequence of overexposure in that all sorts of very shiny and rather terrifying orchestras were suddenly interested in giving me a run for their money. The problem is, when you're that young and you haven't perhaps yet learned to embrace what is individually and uniquely yours, your authentic self, you feel like an utter sham. And let's be under no illusions, orchestras do enjoy particularly the blood sport of seeing how long it takes to completely unravel a new conductor. It's like, can we make him or her basically melt into a pool of ectoplasm within the first 5 minutes of the first rehearsal? Now, this is very justifiable and very understandable. Orchestras have to sweat an awful lot of not very good conductors who are shot through with hubris, narcissism, and very little in the way of talent or even human interpersonal skills. So it's not surprising. And I remember dismal experiences I had, like, for instance, standing in front of a big orchestra, trying to get them to do just a small, modest crescendo, a small, modest upsurge in volume. And I was doing what my teachers had shown me, that old idea that it's a bit like if you've got a pony in a paddock, you want to catch the pony, you have a carrot, Do you A, run around after the pony, brandishing the carrot and shouting? Or do you B, stand stock still, hold the carrot, and wait for the pony to come? So there I am in front of this orchestra, this august orchestra of people who are all double my age. And I'm thinking, right, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to get their focus. I'm going to pull them in, and they're going to feel that, and they're just going to find themselves growing in volume. Nothing happening, so I start getting a bit bigger in my gesture. And before long, I'm like a kind of rabid windmill going around and round. By this time, the music has basically stopped altogether. I'm no longer a trusted person in the room. I've become a figure of fun. And I remember a joke that a bassoonist shared with me in a break on that first rehearsal day. And he said, Charles, I've got a joke for you. What's the difference, do you think, between a bull and an orchestra? And I said, well, you're going to tell me anyway. What is the difference between a bull and an orchestra? He said, well, with a bull, you've got the horns at the front and the bum hole at the back. You switch that round and you've got the orchestral situation to a T. I must say, it sort of turned my guts to water, and it was so hard to even remotely believe or sort of reach out and grab the words I'd had from Sir Colin Davis, who was a bit of a mentor of mine at the time. And he said to me, Charles, you have to understand that conducting is like holding a small bird in your hand. You hold it too tightly, you will crush it. If you hold it too loosely, it will fly away. I must say in those days I couldn't even identify the bird. But the essential core problem for me was that I hadn't yet learned to embrace my own authentic self, by which I mean, if I'm preparing to conduct a Beethoven symphony, age 24, it's not like I'm going to conduct it better than anyone else. But if I've truly embraced my authentic, unique self, I will conduct it differently from anyone else. And that in itself is the ultimate validation, recognizing that each and every citizen of planet Earth has unique qualities. But these are unique qualities which will elude them until they have embraced that which is authentically themselves. And it's difficult, isn't it? Because every single tiny baby that is born is innately, fabulously authentic in every possible way. Great, isn't it? And then school starts, and very naturally, human beings being quite tribal, we start to seek ways of conforming, of fitting in with other people who we aspire to, other people that we want to like us. So we learn particular ways of talking, how to do our hair, what food we might like, what music we listen to. All well and good, all natural, no problem. But then when you are emerging as a young adult and starting to try and find your way in the world, that's the moment where somehow someone needs to give you a little kind of nudge. Go on, delve back down inside yourself and find what is uniquely you, what belongs to you. This may sound like a facetiously simple bunch of things to say to you, ladies and gentlemen, but I tell you what, it changed my life and made me find happiness and flow in music again. Suddenly, I felt I had a reason to exist. Suddenly, I didn't feel like the fraudulent little git standing just outside the horseshoe of the orchestra, but someone who was alive with the energy and possibility of the music we were there to make. Now, again, it was South Africa that taught me a lot about reclaiming what is authentically mine and finding joy in it. Here's the thing, if you're a conductor and you're preparing an opera with a company, invariably there will be periods of time when you and the principal singers will get together one-on-one and have kind of coaching sessions through their principal material, their main arias, recitatives, whatever it may be. So you're working with them to develop collectively what their musical self, what their musical persona is, what the drive and direction of their characterization of this role is going to be. So in this scenario, let's say you're in Europe or you're in America. I'm being very general, but it is broadly true. That conversation in that coaching session will be almost entirely about technique. Where to pitch bend, how much vibrato to use, how to color that vowel, what brittleness you need over that particular consonant. It's all well and good. It's about kind of buffing up the kind of technological, that's the wrong word, the technical prowess of this character and their performance. Conversely, when you're working with a South African singer, in exactly the same scenario, this coaching session, you wouldn't ever even talk about technique. You would only ever be talking about what is the truth of this line, what is the truth of this character in this moment. And then, of course, the technique will follow. Your musical being will naturally introduce or take away the vibrato or color a certain vowel in a certain way. It just happens organically, and it means that the end product, the performance, is so much more deep and meaningful. I want to show you two short clips. Again, the habanera from Carmen. You'll remember this is a moment where Carmen is trying to express to all those around her why she has such a deep magnetism, why no one can resist her in any way, shape, or form. I'm going to first play you a very distinguished European mezzo doing this exact little section. And I want you to look very carefully at her, especially when the camera comes in close on her eyes, and ask yourself, do I believe you? Thank you. I don't know if many of you could see that very clearly because it was a bit far away, but there's something about the hip move and the kind of, I am irresistible. She's like wearing this role. It's like a very, very extraordinary and sophisticated costume. It's like a set of clothing. It doesn't feel like it's necessarily coming from here. Now, listen to exactly the same sequence from Habanera, sung by Pauline Malafane in Cape Town. I hope you can see a little bit of what I mean. That's not a performance. That is a manifestation of somebody's soul. In that moment, to all intents and purposes, that isn't Pauline Malafane, that is Carmen. And in fact, to me, I can pay no greater compliment than to echo the words of Prosper Mérimée himself, the man that wrote the novella upon which Bizet wrote his opera. And Mérimée says, if you want to understand the look in my Carmen's eyes, look into the eyes of your cat as it stalks a sparrow. I think Pauline has it. Now, there's one other great gift. Well, there were many other great gifts, but there's one other notable gift I want to share with you that South Africa and that culture gave to me, which I decided to bring back here to the UK and see if it would hold water. I remember walking down a township, I think it was Guguletu, which is another large sprawling township in the Western Cape. And from round a street corner, I heard someone playing the violin exquisitely well. It was a big, fat, rounded sound, but plenty of incision and brightness, and an incredible bow technique, and such sweet tone. So I hastened round the street corner to find myself looking at a teenage boy, he's probably about 16, playing the absolute pants off a violin. But this was no ordinary violin. This was a violin made out of rubbish. It was like an oil can and a bit of wood stuck to it, some strings pulled across. And the bow, ladies and gentlemen, a bit of bamboo stick that he'd kind of roughened up a bit. And yet such was his deep, authentic belief and passion that he could transform this literally box of junk into something which could sound almost like a Stradivarius, was so wholesale, was so extreme, that lo and behold, that was the magic he managed to achieve. And it really set me thinking, wow, wasn't it Mandela, I think Mandela, who said, necessity is the mother of invention. If you live in a township, and as I said before, these dizzyingly musical communities, you want to play an instrument, you're never going to afford to buy one, or indeed probably to have any lessons on such an instrument. So you just go on and make your own out of whatever comes to hand. So I thought, wouldn't it be interesting? I had a job, principal guest conductor of the BBC Concert Orchestra at the time, and I said to them, hey guys, wouldn't this be really interesting to see if we could take this extraordinary third world daring do and apply it to you guys in a London setting, and hey, maybe we'll play the BBC Proms with an orchestra made out of rubbish. They were very much up for the challenge, like, oh, this sounds exciting, slightly amusing, maybe slightly comic. Hadn't really thought it through at this point. Anyway, so off we went, and I commissioned 11 or 12 leading instrument makers from around the country to set to work to build us a complete symphony orchestra of instruments, but with the one rule that all the ingredients for the instruments need to come from scrap heaps or recycling depots. So far, so good. Fast forward to the first workshop when we were trying out some of the first prototype instruments. I cannot tell you what a disaster it was. Not only did it sound unspeakably bad, but people were actually injured by their instruments. A couple actually had to go to hospital because the instrument had sort of exploded in their face. It wasn't a good look. And suddenly this orchestra, which had been broadly, quite enthusiastically on side with me, saw me as public enemy number one. Who the hell did I think I was? What on earth did I think I was going to do? And by then, by the way, we'd had the prom date confirmed, probably the night after the Berlin Philharmonic or something, just to add insult to injury, that they were going to be made to look like utter fools, they were going to sound terrible, and they'd probably hurt themselves in the process. Not a good look. Anyhow, somehow or other, by ploughing deep into my authentic truth, my authentic self, my authentic belief that this was still a worthwhile exercise, if for no other reason than to remind ourselves how extraordinarily lucky we are, that we live in a culture where people can broadly, not exclusively, but broadly buy violins or find the means to get tuition. Not so in Karlitsa, not so in Guguletu, right? It's a different world. They make do. So at the very least, it felt like something decent that we could do, sort of spiritually. So the orchestra very reluctantly stayed on board. The instrument makers went away and fine-tuned their processes and made substantial modifications to their instruments. Fast forward to the event itself, and it was a wonderful success. We got a great big ovation in the hall, and in the wonderful way that orchestras, like any body of people, can just sort of change their minds about something or sort of conveniently forget what they thought before. They were all like kind of, wow, that was one of the best nights of our lives. It was always thought it was such a great idea. I was like, oh, you liar. Anyhow, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to play the climax of the 1812 overture so you can hear how hilariously, fabulously, wonderfully scrappy it sounds. Fantastically out of sync, that piece of film, I realise now. But anyway, it still makes my palms sweat, the sight of that. It was so rich in jeopardy. And yet, Isn't it always the case that when you've been through a jeopardy-rich situation, you've somehow come out the other side? The sheer shot of happiness, like crazy endorphins that engenders, and as I've already said, for the orchestra, just as much as for me. Now, it's interesting, isn't it, that I'm here tonight, and we are all here, if you like, celebrating happiness, as we're basically in the Feast of the Dead, aren't we? Wasn't it called Belhain, the original Celtic festival of the dead, 1st and 2nd of November? And of course, in the Christian tradition, All Souls Night is today. Sorry, All Saints' Day is today. All Souls is tomorrow. But in fact, to me, there's nothing paradoxical about talking about happiness in the context of a period of time which is really about grief or loss. I don't know if you share this with me, but it seems to me that the music that is least inspiring is happy music. I find happy music broadly quite depressing, whereas I love melancholic music. It's like melancholic music will meet me in whatever state I'm in. You know, it might lift me up, it might give me the catharsis I need, or it might just let me have a good old cry. Whatever I'm feeling, the music will meet me in that place. And I'd go further than that, and I'd say that British people are innately melancholic. If we have a national character, it's melancholia, I would argue. I mean, our weather's not so good, our food's not great, we've got bad teeth, many of us. But we enjoy the comforting state of mild melancholy. We're not blackly melancholic. I don't think we want to kill ourselves generally. We sort of put up with it. But the putting up is a kind of sweet thing. It's a kind of consoling and comforting thing. I mean, look no further than Shakespeare. Orsino, the opening scene of Twelfth Night. He's drunk with unrequited love, a deep, deep, delicious misery that she won't love him back. And he confesses that he loves music best which has a dying fall. And you think about our folk culture, it totally mimics this dying fall. Greensleeves, da 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 da, da 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 da. There's a brief burst of sunshine in the chorus. Right back into its cave, like a sort of piece of bacterium. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are a melancholic race, and I think we find sweet succor in melancholy. So there's a song that I wanted to share with you tonight. It's a fantastic piece of kind of Tudor misery, because it seems to me that singing is something that on a happiness lecture we should all do, right? Singing just makes you happy. Singing is so good for you. It's great cardiovascular exercise. It's tremendous teamwork. It makes for congruence. I mean, it sounds facetious, but I do actually genuinely believe that if every parliament in the world had to sing in harmony a little bit every morning before the day's events began, there would be more flow. There would be more congruence. There'd be less sort of cat fighting. So what do you say, ladies and gentlemen? Are you up for having a little sing? Modest approval. So, yes, this is a song. It's called Rose, 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 Rose. Rose, 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 Rose. When shall I see thee wed? I marry that thou wilt when I am dead. So it's two people. Someone saying to Rose, 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 when are you going to get married? And Rose answers, yeah, sure. You'll see me get married when I'm dead. You see how comforting that is, ladies and gentlemen. You can feel it deep in your waters, can't you? Rose, 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 rose. When shall I see thee wed? I marry that thou wilt when I am dead. So David was telling me that the CBSO in time-honored days past recorded in here, and I can hear now why. It must have been amazing. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's get these lyrics up, actually. There you go, chaps. You see? 4 roses in a row. That's line 1. Easy lyric. When shall I see thee wed? I marry. Nice double use, double meaning of the word marry. For sure, I, for sure, that thou wilt. when I'm dead. I'm going to sing phrase 1 to you, ladies and gentlemen, and I'd like you to sing it back to me with gusto. Rose, 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 rose. Slightly reluctant, slightly cow-like sound coming out at the moment, ladies and gentlemen. You just need to put your backs into it a little bit, you know. It's funny, isn't it? Because Britain is a nation of singers. Look at our football, right? We have greater singing at our football than in any other country in the world. I mean, you watch a German game or an Italian game. There's a certain amount of chanting, but nothing like the 10 fathoms of song, that oceanic roar that you hear in a British football stadium. But the irony is, of course, that if you stopped a football fan on the way into the Emirates Stadium just before a match, and you said, hang on a minute, I know what you're going in there for. It's only a bit about the football, but really it's about the singing, isn't it? They go, don't be daft. I'm going in to watch the beautiful game. But conversely, if you stood in the middle of the pitch just before kickoff and you said, ladies and gentlemen, one change in the normal run of things. Today, please, no singing. Well, the match would be rubbish, wouldn't it? Because so much of the drama of the game and the kind of degree of psych-up that each team gets is floating on the sea of vocal sound, which their fans are banging out to support them and to intimidate their opponents. It's a fundamental part of the experience. So, ladies and gentlemen, be like a British football crowd, not a German one, if you pardon that metaphor. Okay, so it's rose, 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 rose. When shall I see thee wed? I marry that thou wilt. Yeah, now this, of course, is a story in 4 parts. In other words, 4 melodic lines. The first one lays out its stall. The second one starts to build from there. The third phrase, I think it's fair to say, is the climax. It's the punchline. It's the moment of greatest intensity. It also happens to be the highest notes. So I suggest you put extra amounts of energy into I marry that thou wilt. Do you like that? Right? It's do you remember X Factor? Yeah, I call that the X Factor scoop. You know how they all sing like that on that? Everything is scooped up, down, round. It's like people will feel sorry for you, vote for you, have your babies, I don't know. So we need a bit of that scoop. I marry that thou wilt. You can feel that, it's powerful. Ladies, gentlemen, all of you, it's powerful. I marry that thou wilt. When I am dead. Okay, I'm going to sing the first 2 phrases to you, and then I want them back from you. We're starting to get some engagement now, ladies and gentlemen, which is thrilling me more than I can say. Rose, 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 when shall I see thee wed? Yes, and you can feel that through phrase 2, things are really starting to heat up. We're preparing for our climax point. When shall I see thee wed? Which then creates a springboard for I marry that thou wilt. And then there's that fabulous dying fall, that melodic droop at the end. Okay, so let's go from the beginning now and see if we can do the whole thing. Here we go. Rose. Building up now. Yes, come on. Yes, go. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is very exciting. This is very, very exciting. Now, how about if we make that into 4-part harmony? What do you think? It's only a round in it, so it's very simple. We're going to divide the group, we're going to divide the room into 4. So, I'd say this is group 1, and it's going to go until about halfway back, okay? Maybe to here. You lovely people are group 2. You lovely people are group 3. And you, lovely lot, are the final group, group number 4. Now, remember, ladies and gentlemen, this is no longer about kindness, happiness particularly, or at least any kind of like good feelings towards any other group. You've got one purpose, and that's to win. To make a bigger, more glorious, more finely tuned sound than the other 3 miserable groups that happen to also be here this night. Okay, we'll go around a few times and see how it feels. Why don't we stand up? If you fancy standing up, do stand up. No rule, but if you like to, there it is. Feel that energy coursing through your lungs, that tremendous sense of your rib cage expanding. Just the joy of being alive, the joy of singing, ladies and gentlemen. Group 1, here we go now. Group 2. Group 3. Group 4. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. To sit down. Yes, give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you for taking the plunge with me in that way. I'd say your sense of tempo is slightly on the loose side, but we'll let that rest. Perhaps it's down to the mellifluous nature of these acoustics. The final thing I want to talk to you about stems from another quality, which is basically right next door to embracing what is authentically your unique self, your unique voice. And it's something which I've got a very kind of piquant, personal, and intense relationship with. And I suspect I'm not alone. What has the pandemic thrown up for us, apart from being an absolutely atrociously horrible 18 months, nearly 2 years, I suppose, now? Well, it's thrown up lots of terrible things: loss, heartache, anxiety. But I also put it to you that perhaps it's created an opportunity. The opportunity to embrace your vulnerable self. Do you think we could be looking forward to a world where there's less sense of the alpha male, there's less sense of the keep calm and carry on, the stiff upper lip, the whole process of not being authentically yourself? You make a mistake at work and then expend an inordinate amount of energy and probably cause more collateral damage trying to cover up the mistake you've made, rather than wearing it loud, sharing it with colleagues, and then a congruent, sensible way can be made or achieved or worked out to make good the mistake. To me, it's very logical. Now, my particular connection here is that, as Sir David said, I went on Desert Island Discs last year, and I decided to come out about something, a very dark, buried part of my child self, my childhood history, in public for the first time, that I was the victim of prolonged abuse as a child. Now, the reason why I share this horrible piece of information with you is just to express to you how important it was and what a significant milestone it was in my life. Expressing it publicly, it was liberating. And it made me think, and there's another real reason for this story, about not only how liberating it is, but how much better it makes things flow for you, but for those around you, if people are a little bit more real. You see, orchestras are wonderfully real. You can always tell who's having a bad day, and you can kind of sense what's behind the bad day they're having, and it all goes into how they play and what their general demeanor is. But I go a step further than that when I start to talk to you about Para Orchestra, which is a group I started just before the London 2012 Paralympic Games. Quick backstory: my 4 children, my youngest child rather, has cerebral palsy. So in her short life, she's introduced me and made me think about that whole community of people who identify as disabled, that I'd never thought about at all before. And I found myself thinking, why is it in a career spanning nearly 30 years now of conducting orchestras all over the world that I can count on the fingers of one hand the number of musicians I've met in any of those orchestras over that prolonged period of time who have a disability. So I'm thinking to myself, well, this is nuts. This makes no sense. You can't tell me there aren't millions of prodigiously gifted musicians who happen to be disabled. Where's their platform? Where's their voice? Music is our most universal language, more than any dialect or tongue. We know this, right? You can sing a tune to a child in Beijing and the same tune to a child in Cape Town. And despite the inordinate cultural, circumstantial differences in experience between those two children, they will draw some of the same truths from that melody. That is how universal it is. And yet, our music industry is in the dark ages on this issue. And by the way, it's not just about leveling playing fields. It's about not missing out on talent. Why would we miss out on millions of people, potentially brilliantly gifted people, because they don't fit a standard mold? Now, the reason why I'm bringing all this up and talking about it in the context of vulnerability is that what parochestal musicians have shown me is how liberating and how it feeds great music making and by extension happiness. If you are wearing your vulnerability on the outside, if you are completely open about how you are in all your ways, both conventional and unconventional. Sorry, just to backtrack a minute. So I formed Power Orchestra. I saw the Paralympics, 2012 Paralympics, as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to shine a huge light on this issue. I formed the group. In its first iteration, there were just 18 musicians. And after a lot of screaming and shouting and banging on doors and being very grumpy and angry with people, I persuaded the powers that be to let the Power Orchestra in to make its maiden performance on the 9th of September 2012. Big challenge that, ladies and gentlemen, not just because it was an unknown entity, but because I am afraid, and this is an uncomfortable truth, most people, even liberal, intelligent-minded people, find it quite hard to put the words disability and excellence in the same sentence. They just do. It's a fact. So when I was saying to people, it's a new orchestra, just like any other orchestra, except all the musicians in it will identify as disabled, everyone's like, oh, that's a lovely idea. But I could smell the half-formed thought at the back of their minds, which is, yeah, it won't be any good, will it? This is the prejudice that we fight. And yet, I say to you again, these musicians, and there are now best part of 40 musicians who identify as disabled in Power Orchestra, which is now a fully integrated mix of people who identify as disabled and people who don't. Of those 40 people I've met now, I have learned so much about the power of vulnerability, about the power of being authentically yourself. Because in many cases, many forms of disability, you have no alternative. It's like you don't sweat the small stuff. I'll give you an example about this. Here's the thing. When you improvise, I'm a musician that loves to improvise, always have done. Wherever I am in the world, I like to sit down with musicians and just spontaneously to grow some music in that moment. Now, you always get the same scenario. I don't know if anyone will identify with this, which is that you sit down together in this said environment, you're going to improvise together, and then there is always a terrible, itchy silence, a pregnant silence that goes on and on and on and on, because no one wants to be the first to throw their hat in the ring. Everyone's fearful they'll look foolish, they'll make the wrong call, they'll look like an idiot. So everyone is sitting back, almost sitting on their hands, waiting for someone else to take the plunge. And it gets to that point where almost all the oxygen has been sucked out of the room. And then as if by magic, people can bear it no more, they all dive in, and it's an absolute chaos. It's bedlam for a while, until people have started to relax and breathe and trust themselves and trust what they're listening to and respond. Now, with the first 4 members of Power Orchestra, that whole process took, at best, 2 minutes. Because if you're a wheelchair user, if you are visually impaired, if you have no hearing, whatever, if you have a very outward and clear disability, I hate that word, by the way, but we use it because it's what we have. If you have that very clear outward demonstration of disability, there is a liberation to the fact that you're not held back by the same issues of petty ego, self-consciousness, self-disgust, which completely drag the rest of us back all the time. These 4 musicians were within literally 2 minutes, making amazing consonant music like minnows in a stream, reacting, offering, sharing, supporting, taking the lead. That in itself is so inspiring, right? So inspiring. I'll give you another example of why This is popular held belief, isn't it? That we who run the able-bodied world, that disabled people want to join our world. It's almost like, it's a one-way direction of travel. Again, I say to you, simply not the case. The fact is that there is so much to be learned by non-disabled people from people who identify as disabled, because their experience of life is so different, and in many ways, as I'm already suggesting to you, more consonant, more involved, more inflamed, more invested, because they're not cutting through all the kind of shallow grass which dogs the rest of us. So much to learn, so many opportunities which I hope are more likely to come now than they have in any previous era. So just to finish off, ladies and gentlemen, I want to play you, because I'm sure I've gassed on for far too long already, I'm going to play you not a recent project we've done, because we've now been together making music around the world for 11 years actually. I want to play you one of the very, very first things we recorded at the very, very beginning of the journey. Simply because, well, it's beautiful. It's the kind of heartwarming thing that one might want to have on a Monday night, which is the 1st of November. Sorry to share that news. But it's also, I suppose, because the theme of this song is so close to what I've been talking about, or trying to talk about, all this evening. It's a song which Cyndi Lauper made famous in the 1980s called True Colours. It's about embracing your own true colours and embracing the true colours of those around you, not being distracted by the surface noise. But what is the deep potential, the deep spirit, the deep possibility that lies within? And Power Orchestra has shown me that more than any other group of people in my entire life long. That embracing true colours, that's where happiness lies. Thank you.
You with the sad eyes, don't be discouraged, oh I realize it's hard to take courage in a world full of people. You can lose sight of it all, and the darkness inside you makes you feel so small.
Charles, thank you. That was absolutely fabulous. We've got some time for questions. We're going to do it in a very conventional way. There are roving mics. If you could raise your hand, I will do my David Dimbleby impersonation and point you out, and then please just wait until a microphone comes to you. So, questions? There's a question here at the front in the third row. That's right, you can sprint.
Hi, thanks very much. That was just a fantastic talk, I thought. Which MP do you believe would oppose most robustly your proposal to sing together each day at the start of the day's business? In the House of Commons?
It would have to come from the backbenchers, wouldn't it? Don't you think? They'd have to be the ringleaders of it. It couldn't be the usual suspects. I think it would be all political parties. It's funny, I'm finding at the moment, I don't know if you're finding this, that the political world is kind of like turning on its head in the sense that the people who perhaps are the least like of your political persuasion now seem to be the ones singing from more like your song sheet. I don't know if that resonates with anyone. It's like, I'm not naturally a Conservative supporter, I'm naturally a Labour supporter, but I'm finding that some of the backbench Conservatives are speaking more sense to me at the moment than most of the Labour Party, which is a very discombobulating effect. Anyway, were they all to sing, life would be better, don't you think? Imagine, we wouldn't have to listen to their braying anymore. They could do their debating in 8-part harmony and by way of counterpoint. That would be the way. Does that answer your question?
It's a question towards the back there. Wave your hand vigorously. Were you raising your hand? No, you weren't raising your hand. In which case you would have been embarrassed if a microphone had come. There is a question towards the back at this side. Yeah, microphone's coming towards you. Patience will be rewarded.
So
Right.
it's important to trust people. So how can you sort of engender that trust if you don't feel trusting? How can you become more trusting?
Gosh, it's a really, really good question. Obviously, I by no means have the complete answer to that, but I would still say that for me personally, the only way I've even remotely began to be able to trust other people is once I've first completely and wholeheartedly learned to trust myself. It's almost like, you know that announcement you get, the instruction you get on an aeroplane when they say, in the event of oxygen dropout, these masks will come down. Please be sure to put your own mask on first before you help your child or your relative or the person next to you. And for me, that's a beautiful little metaphor about this trust thing, that it can't come unless you first found that degree of acceptance of yourself and compassion for yourself. Certainly for me, with my very traumatic history, it's been very hard for me to come into a position of accommodation and acceptance of myself. Being abused, sorry to say it, leaves you with unmentionable kind of soiling, like scars, like spots that you can't ever scratch out. It's impossible to get rid of the scarring of it, that's the fact of it. But what you can do is finding a way of becoming accommodating, kind towards yourself. And I can't explain it any better than that, but once I was able to do that, and by extension to trust myself, by extension to love myself, I've become so much more trusting and able to meet head-on every human that I interact with.
Yes, question just towards the front here. No, it'll come around the side. Yes, it's on its way.
Thank you very much. It was a very, very beautiful presentation, and one can feel that you brought the heart and you spoke from within for a lot of the time. In discussing about this idea of the trust and discussing about the idea, which again I very much like the fact that in order to reach towards happiness you need to find and bring in yourself what you have, there is a danger there of the individuality. And when you replied to the previous question about how can you trust the other one, and linking it with the idea of the individuality, I thought that probably an important element is understanding the universality of human experience. So probably to bring in what you have in you but not to consider that you are the only one experiencing that, but trying to understand how much the others are feeling. So is that balance between individual experience with a universal experience of human experience? So I don't know if that...
100%, 100%. I mean, we are a species, we are a tribe, we do all have lots in common with each other. It's just about finding the balance and understanding the very delicate nuance which exists between what is uniquely you and hopefully the parts of yourself that you can embrace and can adopt and love and wear with pride, which then equips you to be able to treat every other human being with exactly the same grace and compassion. That's my view anyway, that we're not all identical, and in fact many of our institutions and sort of ways of being have kind of been contradictory to that. It's like we've had this idea for centuries that the way you educate children is to kind of tie them down and kind of stuff knowledge down their throats until they're full, and then you go, there you go, you're educated now. Whereas we know better now, I'd like to think we know better now, which is that each and every child just needs to find that touch paper, that kind of catalytic spark, and then they're unstoppable. You can't give that to them, you can sort of help them unlock it in themselves, and there are a million different ways in a million different people of achieving that. So we are both greater than the sum of our parts, gloriously individual, gloriously united. I 100% agree with you.
Yes.
First of all, thank you very much indeed for the fantastic talk. Enjoyed it a lot. I would like to ask you, did you find any more true colors in your own soul while working with these talented people in the orchestra to Paralympics? And maybe how it was reflected among your family, your friends, your colleagues in music world. Clearly, throughout your career, you add enough colors to create that very rainbow which kids were singing about. But I'd like to hear, just as a finale, perhaps, about the true color you found in your own soul while working with this orchestra. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that the most primary color I've discovered in myself is kindness. Kindness to myself, and then, as I keep saying, the amazing, ultimate equipment. The kindness in myself becomes the equipment with which I can be kind and not mistrustful of everyone around me. For so many years I was struggling with my own demons, my own sense of being fraudulent, my own sense of not fitting in, that I felt it was me against the world. All those poor orchestras whose time I wasted over so many years because I had that mindset. I was like fighting with them. And it's Power Orchestra, South Africa of course as well, but Power Orchestra in particular, which has genuinely put that whole side of me quietly down now. Kindness to myself, kindness to each and every human that I encounter. Everyone in that equation has a better time.
Question? Yes, here at the front, right at the front.
It's a remarkable enthusiasm that you portray. I'm just wondering whether you can recall any incidents when that enthusiasm has been dented.
Oh my goodness, yeah, okay, well, seeing as I'm in the kind of age of disinhibition, I seem to be in the age of disinhibition now. I'm 50, nearly 55, and it's like I can't stop saying all the awful things that have happened. Anyway, yes, indeed I have, and it still makes me smart to recall, but I got that call, which every conductor dreams of, this is in about 2009, to come and conduct the Concertgebouw Orchestra in Amsterdam, who are, well, my favourite orchestra on the planet. They are, well, they're always in a tussle probably with the Berlin Philharmonic, but to me they are the greatest orchestra in the world. So you get that, you don't get that call, right? That's not a call which comes often. I was already doing an opera in London that week, so it was a bit sketchy. I was like flying to and fro, rehearsing the orchestra in Amsterdam, coming back doing the shows at the South Bank. So I was right on the edge of my ability to cope. Rehearsals with Concertgebouw, flying so high, we're having the most incredible time. It's like I'm on stage with 100 racehorses, or 100 Ferraris, or 100 Fabergé eggs. I don't know, I'm running out of metaphors, but these people are beyond incredible. It's like chamber music on a grand scale. And we're flying so high. Anyhow, through sheer exhaustion and everything else being overly kind of porous, the night before the performance, I was already in Amsterdam. I got together with the bass player of the orchestra, who's an old friend of mine. He has always been slightly competitive with me, and he went into this long series of anecdotes about all the extraordinary global world-beating conductors they'd worked with just in the previous month. And my little fragile self is going until I'm literally a little like a ball of plasticine on the floor, and I can't shake that feeling. And despite the fact we've had 3 days of astonishing rehearsals, we've been flying so high, I walk onto that platform, and by the way, at the concert cabal, it's a horrible entrance for the conductor. You come in through a stage door right high up at the back near the organ, and you have to walk down this flight of very slippery velvet stairs, all the way down with a spotlight. Everyone's staring at you. So your first worry is you're going to just slip and fall and look like a complete idiot. And I stood in front of that orchestra. We were playing Petrushka of Stravinsky, a piece which I love more than life itself. And by bar 3, I was already floundering, completely lost it, squandering my greatest opportunity, my one and only opportunity with the greatest orchestra on the planet. So that's an example of where I was dented. I can't believe I just told you all that. It's so embarrassing.
Do you know, I think we're going to have to finish on that note.
I'll get my coat.
Oh, sorry, no, there is one. Yeah, the last question here.
Brilliant talk, thank you very much. My question is, wasn't COVID a great thing because it allowed everybody to actually spend the time by themselves so they could discover their inner selves, as you were talking about?
Spoken like a true introvert, I would say. Absolutely, me too. I couldn't agree more. For me, it was like a revelation, and I'm really sorry if this sort of is rubbing salt in anyone's wounds, but for me, when lockdown started, it was the first time in 30 years I wasn't airport hopping, hotel swapping, continent jumping. And I realized, I don't want to do that anymore. 30 years is enough. Terrible for the planet, by the way, and not good for my sense of well-being. I have para orchestra now. So it was the first 6 months of lockdown, that quiet, that lack of human interaction apart from with my family, that a break to that line of endless traveling, that I realized I wanted to spend the rest of my life, which is with para orchestra, much more locally based. And also accepting the fact that I find people quite difficult. I am an introvert, perhaps you are too, and that opportunity to really go inside myself and really embrace my innate vulnerability was the most wonderful gift in a strange way.
Yeah. Just can somebody reactivate the mic? It's probably done remotely. If not, shout.
Oh, there it is. I am an introvert, thank you. It seems to me that people have come out of themselves of evidence by the younger people and the workforce who are saying, we demand more, we demand difference. We demand that we can work out of our home or whatever it is. We want to be able to work 6 hours a day. We want to work 4 days a week, whatever it is. They're claiming their own humanity back.
100% agree with you. I mean, we're only trying to move towards more like a Scandinavian model, aren't we, really? I mean, they've known this for years. The fact that I used to love working with Scandinavian orchestras because they spend all week rehearsing for a symphony program, not 1 3-hour session, or maybe 1 day if you know, there's money, there's resource. They're on the stage in the concert hall all week where they will do their gig at the end of the week. And more to the point, here's the thing I love best about the Scandies. If you're on tour with the Scandinavian orchestra, in fact, I remember one particular example, a Swedish orchestra, we're traveling somewhere to the north of the country. There's a gaggle of male players at the back of the bus knitting hats for their children. And at the front of the bus, a gaggle of female musicians talking about the hunting expedition they went on last weekend. That's the New World Order, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, Charles, you can tell what they thought. You know, you're going to have to come on and take another bow in a moment. And you know, what to say at the end of a fabulous Bags lecture. Firstly, you've got people singing in the Great Hall. It's never happened in a Bags lecture before. And even if we didn't play to great reviews, I mean, we did try. But it was a lecture that took us to so many places globally, so many places emotionally, so many places about ourselves, and so many places about music. As I said at the outset, music's been, my great passion since before I could talk, apparently, according to my parents. And I've always thought music is the most universal language we have, the most profound language we have. And it's music that makes us better people. And you did that tonight. Thank you.